Hello there everyone, I'm Christina at CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this textured wire Kumihimo bracelet, and this is what mine looks like. So you can see here, because we're using wire for the braid, it gets texture in the first place, but also because if we look closely, especially the copper sections here, we intertwine the wires throughout, making the braid slightly differently, so that adds extra texture to it as well. It looks like this here, obviously combining the silver and the copper coloured wire just to give a bit of different interest, and also I've added these beads along the edges also to add another dimension of interest to it. So that's what it looks like, and this is then what it looks like on me. You can see it sits lovely and comfortably around the wrist there, and obviously that clasp on the back is going to keep it nice and secure as well. So I feel that this bracelet will work well for male jewellery, mainly because we get a lot of texture in the braid because we're using wire, but also obviously I've combined it with quite masculine colours. Now you can easily change up your material so you can make it look exactly how you want to, and especially with the beads that you add in as well. But if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. And this is then the wire that I'm using. So I have two different colours of the same gauge, and it's a 0.6mm, and it's a regular round copper wire. So I have silver coated here and then the copper, just to mix up the colours to achieve that effect in the braid that we want. Now the other materials that we're going to use is first of all Kumihimo disc here. Now I'm using a square one, but you can really use either the square or the round one, it doesn't really matter, you'll still achieve the same effect. And then we need the beads for embellishment, so I'm using these 3mm rounds, and the metal spacer beads in gunmetal, but obviously you can really use whatever kind of beads that you prefer. And then I'm going to finish off the ends of the braids using these ribbon ends here so we can attach our findings to those little loops, and the findings that I'm using is a lost or clasp and extender chain, and obviously using the jump rings to put it all together, but you can really use whatever kind of clasp that you prefer. Now check out the description box down below the video because there's going to be the material list written out there and any links you might need as well. So otherwise get all the materials ready and let's get started. And then we need some lengths of our wire. So what I have here is 16 lengths in total of about 40 centimeters each. And then as for the colours, I've got 12 lengths of my silver, and then I've got 4 lengths of my copper. Obviously you can combine yours however you want to. Then what I've done is I've made sure the ends are even on all the wires there, so I put them together. Then I put a piece of insulation tape around all the wires to hold them together, and then I bent the very ends of those wires there back on themselves to make sure they don't pull through the tape. So then I've attached my wires onto my Kumihimo disc, and what I've just done is I've taken that end of the wires with the tape on and put it down through the hole in the centre. So that's sticking out on the back there. I'm also going to be using that to hold on to as we're braiding. So to begin with, I'm just holding on to this little end, but then as the braid grows, I'm just going to keep moving my hands up and keep hold of the braid there right underneath that hole in the disc. And then I just distributed the rest of the wires into the slots like this here. So I have 2 wires in each slot first of all. So we're going to be using more or less these 2 wires in one slot as there were 1 throughout making the braid, except for one little movement when we get a little bit in. But how I've placed them is I've got 2 slots down the top. The 2 middle ones have got 2 wires in each, and they're the silver ones. On the side, the middle ones have got 2 wires in each, they're also the silver ones. And the same on the other side as well, so opposite each other. On the bottom ones here, again, we have 2 wires in each, and these ones down here are the copper ones. And then what I want to do first of all is just make a few rounds of the basic braid here, so we have a little end to finish off the bracelet with. So to do that, what I'm going to be doing is taking from the top here, the right one, I release first of all. Again, we have 2 wires in that slot, so make sure you release both. And then I like to smooth it out. And like I mentioned, I'm just holding on to that short end underneath. I'm not really holding on to the disc. So I'm smoothing out before I kind of start moving it. And then I bring it from that right side on the top towards the left, and then into the slot below the other 2 on that side. So just like that. And then I swap hands, and then I take the left one of those top 2, then smooth it out, and bring it over to the right side, and place it into that slot right below the other 2. Then swap hands again, and then take the bottom 2 and basically do the same thing. So I start with the right one out of the 2, release both of the wires in that one, smooth them out, bring them over to the left, and then place them into the slot just above all those wires that are already on that side. And then I release the left one of them, bring it over to the right, and then I place it into that slot, the equivalent one on this side here. So now I've moved all the top and the bottom ones. Then I'm going to be moving the side ones And we need to get all the wires back in the original setup so we can then obviously repeat the round. So we have the two ones in the middle, just starting on the left side here. I'm going to release the top one out of those two middle ones, smooth them out, and then bring them down and then into the left of the two middle slots on the bottom there. Then I take the bottom one of those two middle ones on the left side, smooth them out and bring them up and again into the left slot of the two middle ones on the top. And then I just want to repeat the exact same thing on the other side. So I take the top one first of those two middle ones and then smooth it out while then bringing it down. And now that just goes into the right slot of those two middle ones, so right next to the one that's already there. Then I take the bottom one of the two and then bring that up. So you can see we're almost back in the original setup. All we got to do now is close up these gaps because we have too much space between them. So I just take one at a time, one pair at a time, and move them one slot closer to each other. Same on the other side. So now the wires are back in the original setup, except obviously you'll notice that the colours have changed. So the copper ones, instead of being on the bottom now, they're now on the sides. But this that we just made now here is one full round of the braid structure. So what we want to do now is just repeat this a few more times, and these copper ones will keep kind of changing positions. They'll swap between the bottom ones there and then these ones on the side, so the top ones on the side. So just do 3 to 4 rounds or so, and then I'll start getting into the main section of the braid. So I now made a few rounds of the braid so far, but before we get into the main section, I just want to show you how I like to work with my wire, because we're using wire for making this braid here, the Kumihimo braid, instead of cord, which is the regular. And it's quite different because the wire reacts very differently than the cord would. So the cord, for instance, is soft, so obviously it molds to each other and around each other really easily. But the wire is obviously hard, so we need to work with it a little bit differently than we would do if it was cord. So just to kind of go through a round again, what I like to do is I release my first one here, and then like I mentioned, I do smooth it out. Every time I make a movement, I smooth out the wires so they're ready for the next movement, because as you're working with this, you will get little bends, and obviously also placing into the slots there, and you don't want them to kind of get into the actual braid itself. So just smooth it out with your fingers. And then also we're using these as pairs, so we have 2 wires in each slot working as one. So what you just got to make sure of to get the most even braid possible is that you kind of make sure they just stay flat next to each other the whole time. So just keep an eye on it throughout down here where the braid is being created to make sure they don't kind of overlap and twist with each other. It's not too big of a deal if they do, it's just really to get it as even as possible, and it's also personal preference. I prefer to try and have them flat next to each other as much as possible. And then just take the left one here, bring it over, and what I also do is when I move my wires, I move them to basically force them into place where I want them to sit. So for instance, I'm bringing this top left one over to the right, so I use my finger here in the middle. After I smooth it out, as I'm bringing it over, I press down on the wire against the end of the open braid there in the middle of the disc, and then I pull my wire, run it through my fingers out towards the slot, then place it into it. Now the bottom ones here, same principle. Release them, smooth them out, and then bring them over towards the opposite side there, so from the right to the left. And here I use my thumb to kind of press against it, and it's kind of a rolling motion that I do. So bring it across like this, and then towards the left and into the slot there. Again, bring it through my fingers to help smooth it out. And the same with the one on the other side. Just take your thumb, press against them, make sure they're flat next to each other, and then place it into the slot. And on the side here, I release the top one of the 2 middle ones and make sure they're flat next to each other, and then I use my index finger, push against it. So the purpose is also so the braid becomes as tight as possible, because it won't get as tight as cord will, because there's going to be natural little spaces and gaps. But to get it as tight as possible, you just want to kind of squeeze them together in there, which is when I do with the movements of pushing it closer together with my fingers as I move them. And the other one again, and here I just use my thumb. So pretty much whenever I go up, I use my thumb, and otherwise index finger. Same on the other side, release the pair, Just make sure they're sitting properly next to each other, and then press against it, kind of in towards the braid itself, and then bring it down. And the bottom one of the two middle ones on the side, again make sure that they're flat next to each other if you need to kind of separate them to do that, and then bring that up while pressing against it there with your thumb. And then we just want to close up the gap on the side, just like before. So that's how I like to work my braid, and I feel that achieves the best and tightest braid that you can, and most even as well. So now we're getting into the main section here, so I'm just going to show you how we do that. Now it's basically the same technique. This is one slight movement that we do a little bit differently. So we start out the same way, and obviously also show you how to add in the beads. But I'm bringing that top right one first of all, start the exact same way, out to the left, and then the left one comes out to the right, and then it's the bottom ones here that's slightly different. Now like I said, the basic technique is the same. We're just going to be kind of combining them a bit differently because we're using pairs of wires, and that's then to achieve the effect that we want in the braid as well. So what I'm doing first of all is actually releasing them here. We don't have to worry about anything unraveling because it is wire, but also the rest is still attached to the disc. So release both pairs, making sure to kind of keep them to each their own side to make sure they're separated so we don't get them mixed up. So like that here, and then you're going to find you naturally have them, you should naturally have them lying flat next to each other. So one is more to the right or the outside, and one is more to the inside, and the same on the opposite side there. So what we need to do is actually take one wire at a time to achieve the effect. So again, I'm going to start from the right side, same as before. I'm going to take the inner one of the two on the right. So I take that first of all, bring that over towards the left, again using my thumb there, in the same slot, but just doing the single wire instead. And I swap hands, and then I take the inner one on the left ones, and then bring that over to the right. So that now crosses over the first one that we just did. Then I go back to the remaining one there on the right side, and then bring it over to the left there, and place it into the same slot. So we're basically bringing the pair back together. Joining them back up, and then I take the remaining one on the left side, bring it over to the right. So again, that's crossing over the previous one. So we're kind of just, you could almost call it intertwining the wires there in the middle, and that just gives that nice little different effect. And then otherwise the rest of the round here, we just finish off and repeating the exact same way as before. So as you can see, that was the only different movement that we do, which is the same basic movement. We're just kind of alternating them slightly, and then just bring the wires in. You can either leave that to the end like I showed before, or you can do that while you're on that side. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you feel is easiest and quickest for you. Again, making sure they're flat next to each other, bring them down, and then the bottom ones there, and bring them up, and then just close up the gap. So there we go. So that's now the first round here of the main section, and that's just to achieve that effect there in the middle. And then for the next round, I'm going to show you how to add in the bead. So again, we start the round in the same way, because in this round that we just did here, that's where the copper ones are going to show in the middle, and that's where we got that effect. But otherwise, just keep doing the same thing now. So we're using the same technique for the rest of it. It's just in the beginning there we kind of just use the basic technique. So we're doing the top ones, move them, and then the bottom ones, bring them all out to the sides. Just like that. Making sure we keep them flat next to each other. Get that nice even braid. And then now we're on the side ones that we need to move from the middle there. And this is where we need to add in our beads. So first of all, I take, in my case here, the copper now. So the top ones are the two middle ones, and then we bring them down, and then I release the two bottom ones, or the middle ones there, slots. And again, we just kind of need to separate them a little bit, because obviously it depends what beads you're using, but most likely you can only fit the bead onto one of the wires here. So what I'm going to do before moving any of these is actually put one bead onto the outer one, because again they're flat next to each other. Make sure you kind of choose the right one. And then we just need to add the bead right at the end of the wire, and then we'll let it drop all the way down there. And you just need to push it as far down as you can possibly make it go, right in on the side, and then you kind of just join them back up, just like that, and then bring it up. And then make sure that that bead stays underneath these wires here that are going out to the side. Same thing on the other side as well. And then just to show you what it looks like a bit more up close as well, so you can see kind of the effect in the middle. I take the top one, first of all, the two middle ones, which in my case are copper again. Bring them down, make sure they're flat next to each other. And then I release the bottom one, the bottom pair of the two middle ones, kind of separate them out. And just, what's really good as well is to check in there to see how they come out of the braid, because that's where it's going to kind of show you which one is the outer one and which one is the inner one. So the outer one that you then actually want to add the bead to. So I'll grab my bead, can add that to the outer one, just so really the bead kind of sits on the outer edge of the braid. So I can just get my bead on here. There we go, and let it drop all the way down, right into the hole in the middle of the disc. Push it as far down as you can get it. Join the wires back up, and then, well, if you need to, pressing down on that bead a bit, bring them both together up into the top slot there. And then you have your beads sitting on the outside edges of the braid. And again, we just close up the gaps there. And then we complete it another round. So basically what we're going to be doing now is start again, so repeat a new round, but this time we're not going to add in beads. We're going to do the round where we cross these copper ones in the middle. So right now I have my copper ones on the bottom. That's when I know this round is where I need to cross them, and also because I just did the round where I added the beads. So just to show you that one more time, that's the next one I'm going to do. And while you move these top ones, make sure that the beads stay underneath the wires. They probably will do, because obviously the wire's kind of bent into shape anyway, but just keep an eye on it. Bring the left one to the opposite side as well. And now release the bottom ones. And I just like to release them both at the same time, so we can kind of just take the wires that we need. Separate them out a bit here. And then you can see that they're naturally sitting, so I have one more towards the outside and one more towards the inside. So from the two right ones there, the one that's more towards the inside is this one here. I'm going to take that, and then same movements and same principle of pushing against with your fingers there. Bring it towards the left, just that single one, and then the inside one of the left ones, I'm going to do the same, bring it towards the right, so that's now crossing over the first one. And then just take the remaining one on the right, cross that over as well. Now join it back up with the original one, so we get the pair again. And then the remaining one on the left there, bring that back over to join up with the original one into that slot on the right. So it looks like that. And then you can kind of see that cross effect right there in the middle, creating at the end of the braid. And obviously you just want to finish off this round again, the exact same way as before. And then this was a round where we crossed the wires in the middle. So you just want to keep repeating this, but alternating between crossing those copper wires, but then every other round as well, you add in the beads in between those rounds basically. So I'm not adding in a bead on either side in every round. I'm doing it kind of in between this crossover section with the copper wires. So I've now kept going here, and I've reached the length that I want my braid to be, with the beaded part there in the middle. And then once we reach the end, what we need to do is just make another few rounds just like we did in the beginning, so we can use that to finish it off. So then to finish off the ends here, what we're going to do is cut off the excess. And because it's wire that we're using for this braid, we don't have to worry about the braid coming undone. It's going to hold its shape. So I take my flush cutters, and we basically just want to choose a point here, that we need to cut. So whatever we have left, that little end is going to fit nicely inside the ribbon end, so you can always use that to kind of measure and see where you need to cut. And then all we're going to do is cut straight across. Now you can just do a little bit at a time. Just like this here, going all the way across. So we have basically a straight line like this, because then the ribbon end is going to fit just perfectly on the end there, and it's going to tuck all the wires inside that ribbon end, so tuck them away and out of the way. But before I actually attach the ribbon end to the braid, I'm going to be using a glue here just to add inside the ribbon end. I really like doing that just to make it more secure, and I'm using this E6000 because it dries clear and also works really well in metal, and it's nice and strong. So I'm just going to get a little bit on a toothpick, something like that. Doesn't have to be too much because it's just going to come spilling out anyway. And then you just want to place this inside the ribbon end, covering the inside walls kind of. You can see this is probably going to be too much, but you can always just wipe some of it away. So make sure we cover the inside of the ribbon end, and then what I have left I like to then take and put on the end of the braid. And just try and really push it in between the wires there. Really get it in the nooks and crannies. Because then when we add the ribbon end to it, it's really going to adhere nicely together and be nice and secure long term as well. So add the glue like that, and then we need to clamp down the ribbon end. So I just grab it here and then we place it over the end of the braid. So bring them both together. And then I take a pair of flat nose pliers. And I like to kind of hold the braid in my hand and put a finger on either side because we want to make sure it stays in place. So the braid stays in the middle of the ribbon end. Then we want to gradually start clamping this down. Now I like to do a bit at a time and gradually move from side to side until it's almost all the way there. And then I take my fingers away and check that it's still in the middle because it can kind of move a little bit while clamping it down. So making sure of that. And then I go in and do final squeeze. Nice and tight. Making sure it stays straight. And I always go in from the sides as well to kind of close up the sides of the ribbon end a bit. And then obviously it feels like it can still kind of slip around, but that's why we just now let the glue dry. And then once it's dried, obviously repeat the same on the other end as well, then it's going to be really nice and strong, and then you can obviously just attach our findings using the drum rings to these little loops. So now once you've finished off both ends there and attached your findings as well, all there's left to do is shape it. So you can either shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, or you can just use your hands and fingers. So the way you do that is you just go in and start putting a curve into it, going from side to side here, making sure obviously the front of the braid is facing outward and the back of it is facing in towards your wrist. But then what you want to do is don't go into one place and just do a big bend because that'll make it out of shape, but gradually, like this, put a curve into the piece, going from side to side, back and forth until the curve becomes more and more obvious. You can see we're gradually getting a curve into it, and obviously we're getting these two ends with the clasps ending up towards each other, so we can actually use the clasp as well. Just keep doing this until you have the shape that you want. So I now finished shaping it, and then it looks like this. So obviously it's now ready to be able to use with a clasp. So it's nice and secure as well. And then in my case here, I've made it more of an oval shape. I tend to do that with my bracelets. I prefer that personally. I feel it sits better on the wrist and it doesn't really move around so much. But obviously you can do it round if you want to, but that's just what I prefer to do. But then the actual braid looks like this here. So you see we have these little almost textured hearts going all the way through, just because of how we intertwine the wire as we're making the braid, but then also the extra embellishment there on the sides. Just adding a little bit of extra touch. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Check out my channel for other tutorials for jewelry in general, but also for other wire Kumihimo jewelry, because I have a few and I've also made a playlist, so feel free to check that out. But thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.